All right, so today we are really diving deep. We're taking on Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. But you have brought us such a fascinating lens through which to view it, this idea that what makes us special as humans is not necessarily our big brains, but our ability to imagine, to believe in things. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's right. Harari's argument is that it's really this capacity for shared myths, for believing in things we can't see or touch, gods, nations, money even, that allowed us to cooperate on a scale never seen before in the animal kingdom. And it's that ability, not just raw intelligence, that lies at the root of human civilization as we know it.
So we're not just talking about like imagining winning the lottery or something. We're talking about imagination as this force that shaped human history.
Exactly. And it starts way back, long before history as we typically think of it. I mean, let's face it, we weren't always the top dogs on the block. Imagine those early humans, Homo sapiens, just another ape trying to survive, alongside much more intimidating creatures like Neanderthals.
Right. I mean, they were much bigger than us,
Yes.
right? Stronger. So how did we go from that to, well, everything?
That's the million-dollar question, and Harari points to a crucial difference that had nothing to do with physical strength. Language. Not just grunts and signals, but complex language. The ability to convey not just danger or food, but abstract ideas, plans, even gossip.
Okay, hold on. Gossip. Like, who's doing what with whom? That's our secret weapon.
It sounds silly, but think about it. Our ancestors huddled around a fire, not only warning each other about predators, but sharing stories, judging each other's character, deciding who to trust. That kind of social information sharing, that's huge. It allows for cooperation beyond anything other animals are capable of.
So it's less about the juicy details and more about how gossip, or maybe social storytelling is a better way to put it, builds bonds and trust within a group.
Exactly. Harari calls this the gossip theory. And it might sound a little tongue-in-cheek, but the implications are profound. Because this ability to gossip, to discuss and judge each other, created a new level of social complexity. It allowed for trust to build between individuals who weren't necessarily related, laying the groundwork for larger, more cohesive groups.
Okay, so I'm seeing the connection here. More trust, more cooperation, bigger groups. But isn't there a limit to how big those groups can get before things fall apart? I mean, too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
You're spot on. And that's where that famous Dunbar number comes in. It suggests there's a cognitive cap, somewhere around 150 people, on the number of stable social connections we can manage without formal structures. Think about it. How many people are you truly close to? People you can really rely on?
Yeah, not that many. I guess I never really thought about it in terms of a hard limit before, but it makes sense.
Right. And yet here we are, living in cities, nations, interacting with millions, even billions of others. So how do we do it? How do we break past the Dunbar number?
Yeah, how did we go from small tribes to, well, everything we know?
Because shared beliefs fueled by language can be incredibly powerful. A small tribe might only have so many members, but if several tribes share a belief in the same God, a common ancestor, a set of laws, suddenly they have a foundation for cooperation on a much larger scale.
It's like these shared stories, these imagined realities, become these invisible bridges between people who might otherwise be strangers.
Exactly. And that right there, that's what Harari calls the cognitive revolution, a pivotal point where humans went from just another animal to something profoundly different. Not because our brains suddenly got bigger overnight, but because our collective imagination, powered by language, allowed us to transmit ideas and cooperate in a way no other species could.
So instead of waiting for slow, random genetic changes to give us an edge, we create this fast track to progress, to building upon each other's ideas and creating something new.
Exactly. It's a pretty radical idea, but it makes you look at human history in a whole new light.
It really does. I mean, to think that our ability to imagine, to believe in something bigger than ourselves is what allowed us to shape the world as we know it, that's amazing. But it also makes me wonder, was this all sunshine and roses? I mean, this power of imagination, was it always used for good?
That, my friend, is the question. Because this ability to imagine, to believe in things we can't see or touch, it doesn't just build bridges. It can also build walls, hierarchies, entire systems of control. And that brings us to the next turning point in Harari's narrative, the agricultural revolution.
So the agricultural revolution, well, we usually think of that as a good thing. We learned how to farm, and that's what allowed us to, like, settle down, build cities, all of that.
Right. It's seen as this huge leap forward.
But you're saying that it might not have been all it's cracked up to be, that our ability to imagine, which we were just talking about, might have actually had some downsides when it came to farming.
It's not that it was necessarily bad, but it definitely came with some trade-offs. See, Harari, he challenges this idea that agriculture was this clear win for humanity. He asks us to picture ourselves just for a second as hunter-gatherers. No stuffy offices, no 9 to 5 grind. Your office is this vast wilderness, and your work. Tracking, hunting, mastering all these different skills just to survive.
Okay, yeah, that does sound kind of cool. More exciting than my average workday for sure.
You're making me think that maybe those hunter-gatherers, maybe they were actually better off than the first farmers. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, in some ways, yeah. When you look at what archaeologists have found, it seems like hunter-gatherers actually had a much more diverse diet than early farmers, which meant they were probably healthier overall. Plus, their lifestyle, while definitely demanding, it kept them physically fit and mentally sharp. There's even evidence that their brains were, on average, larger than those of early farmers. Whoa, really? Bigger brains. Okay, so this is blowing my mind a little bit. If farming was so hard, if hunter-gatherers were healthier and maybe even smarter, why would we ever switch? It seems like, from an evolutionary standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
And that's the paradox, right? Here's the thing, though. As tough as agriculture might have been on individuals, it was a game changer for Homo sapiens as a species. Think about it. How many people can a nomadic tribe, a group of hunter-gatherers, realistically support? Not that many. But a settled farming village, that's a whole different story. That's when you start to see a real population boom.
I get it. So even if life as an individual farmer was harder, more humans, more births, that meant more chances to survive, adapt, pass on genes, all of that.
Precisely. It's almost like a company choosing bigger profits over an employee well-being. Kind of a grim strategy when you think about it that way. But in terms of survival, hey, it worked.
Okay, so farming leads to bigger populations, more humans. But we're still talking about imagination here, right? How does
Yeah.
that fit into all of this?
It's all connected. Because agriculture didn't just change how we interacted with the land, it changed how we interacted with each other. Suddenly, you have the concept of land ownership, of surplus food, and that very human desire to protect what's yours, to get more of it, to come out on top. And that's where those imagined orders we talked about earlier, that's where they really start to take root.
So you're saying that agriculture didn't just allow for civilization, it kind of like planted the seeds for inequality too.
That's a good way to put it. And to manage these bigger, more complex societies, to keep the food flowing and the people in line, well, you needed something more than just a strong back. You needed stories. Stories that could explain and often justify why some people got to hoard the grain while others toiled in the fields.
Okay, so instead of stories about the hunt or spirits in the forest, now you start to see stories about kings chosen by gods, the divine right to rule, these hierarchies that are presented as being like part of the natural order of things.
Exactly. And it's not just stories, right? It's also the very real structures of power that get built and reinforced by these beliefs. Harari, he uses the example of ancient Egypt. The pharaoh wasn't just a king. He was considered a god, a living embodiment of divine power.
And you can't talk about ancient Egypt without mentioning those pyramids. Talk about an ambitious project. Those things weren't built by a small group of volunteers. You needed a huge labor force, and I'm guessing not all of them were there by choice.
Exactly, and that's a pattern we see again and again throughout history. These massive undertakings, from the Mesopotamian ziggurats to the Roman Empire, they weren't just impressive feats of engineering. They were built on the backs of countless people who were often coerced, exploited, and kept in check by these grand narratives, these imagined orders that justified their place in the world.
It's kind of chilling when you think about it. These stories, this ability we have to imagine, it's not just about building things up. It's also about keeping things and people down.
It's a powerful force, and like any powerful force, it can be used in all sorts of ways. But here's the question that keeps coming back to me. If these imagined orders are so powerful, how do we ever move beyond them? How did we go from empires ruled by a supposedly divine right to a world that values, at least in theory, things like democracy and individual rights?
Yeah, how did we get from those early empires to, well, everything that came after?
That's where Harari takes us next, to the rise of global orders, and what he calls the 3 unifying myths that help shape the world as we know it today.
Okay, so we've gone from these small groups, hunter-gatherers, to the first empires, learning how to farm along the way.
Right, quite a journey.
And we're talking about how it's really our human capacity for imagination, for believing in things, it's fueled this whole process.
That's Harari's argument, yeah.
And now we're getting into, like, global orders, things that connect people on an even bigger scale than ever before. So tell me more about these unifying myths you mentioned. What are they and how do they shape the world?
Well, Harari, he argues that as we moved beyond those early empires, three even bigger, more powerful ideas took hold.
Ah,
Ideas that could unite people across vast distances, across different cultures and languages. He calls them myths, not because they're necessarily false,
right.
but because their power comes from collective belief, from that shared imagination we've been talking about.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what's the first myth on this global scale?
The first one might surprise you. It's money.
Money. Okay, I mean, I know money makes the world go round and all that, but how is it a myth?
Because when you really break it down, money is just, well, it's an idea. It's a shared illusion that we've all agreed to believe in.
What do you mean?
Think about it. A dollar bill, a gold coin, some numbers on a screen, they have no inherent value in and of themselves. They only have the value that we as a society agreed to give them.
Wow, you're right. It's like my whole life is dictated by these pieces of paper and numbers that only mean something because we all say they do.
Exactly. And it's that shared belief, that leap of faith, that allows for trade and cooperation on a global scale. Two people from completely different worlds can still do business, can still exchange goods and services because they both believe in this system, in the power of money.
It's wild when you think about it like that. It's
Right.
like we've imagined this whole system into existence, and it functions because of that shared imagination.
Right. It's really quite remarkable. Okay, so that's money. The second unifying myth is empires.
Empires, but we were just talking about how empires were often built on like conquest and violence.
You're not wrong. And Harari, he's not arguing that empires were a good thing, morally speaking,
Okay.
but he is acknowledging the massive impact they had on shaping the world as we know it. Empires might have been brutal, but they also brought about a certain degree of standardization.
Standardization.
Yeah, like think about it. Common languages, legal codes, standardized weights and measures. These things help to connect people and ideas across vast distances. Like, for all their flaws, empires did create a foundation for larger scale cooperation, even if it wasn't always intentional or pretty.
So kind of like the Roman Empire. Terrible bosses, but they really nailed infrastructure.
That's a surprisingly accurate way to put it, yeah. But it's true. Think about the legacy of Roman law, their road systems, even their language. These things had a ripple effect on history, influencing the development of countless cultures and societies that came after them.
It makes you realize that history is never black and white, isn't it? Even the things we think of as bad or wrong had these long-lasting consequences that we're still grappling with today.
Exactly. Okay, are you ready for the third unifying myth?
Hit me with it.
This one's a big one. Religion.
Religion, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, religion has been a powerful force throughout history.
Absolutely. And again, Harari, he's not advocating for any one religion in particular, but he's pointing out the role that religion as a concept, as this imagined order, has played in shaping human societies. Religions, they provide people with a sense of meaning, of purpose, of belonging. They offer a moral framework, a set of rules to live by.
And they often do it on a scale that goes way beyond any one tribe or nation.
Huh.
I mean, you look at the spread of Buddhism, Christianity, Islam. These religions connected millions of people across continents.
Exactly. And here's where things get really interesting. Even a lot of the secular values we hold dear today, things like human rights, the inherent dignity of every individual, often have roots in these ancient religious beliefs.
So you're saying that even if you don't subscribe to a specific religion, even if you consider yourself an atheist or agnostic, our world is still shaped by the legacy of those belief systems.
Precisely. The idea that every human life is precious, that's not something you can prove scientifically.
Right.
It's a belief, a kind of faith. And it's a belief that's been profoundly influential in shaping our morals, our laws, and our understanding of what it means to be human.
Wow. When you put it like that, it really highlights how deeply intertwined our history is with these shared narratives. It's like from those early campfire stories to these global religions, our ability to imagine and believe is the one constant throughout human evolution.
It's a powerful through line for sure.
But this brings up a question for me. What about science? I mean, science is supposed to be about like objective truth, facts, not stories and beliefs.
That's where Harari's final chapter takes us, the scientific revolution. Because even science, he argues, even with its emphasis on observation and experimentation, even science is born from human imagination.
Okay, I got to be honest. I'm having a little trouble wrapping my head around that one. Explain it to me.
Well, think about it this way. At its core, science is about asking questions, imagining new possibilities, and then testing those possibilities against reality. It's not about claiming to have all the answers, but about acknowledging our ignorance and constantly searching for new knowledge, even if it means proving our previous assumptions wrong.
So instead of saying, this is the truth because I said so, science is more like, I have no idea, let's find out.
Exactly. And it's that humility, that willingness to be proven wrong, to constantly revise and update our understanding of the universe that's led to the incredible explosion of scientific progress we've seen over the past few centuries.
It's true. From like understanding the vastness of space to unraveling the secrets of DNA, science has opened up all these new frontiers that we wouldn't have even known existed if we hadn't dared to imagine them first.
And yet, with all its power, with all the good that science has brought into the world, Harari is also urging caution.
What do you mean?
I mean, he's quick to remind us that science is a double-edged sword. Yes, it's given us incredible tools and knowledge, but it's also given us the means to destroy ourselves and our planet on a scale that our ancestors couldn't have even imagined.
This is a sobering thought for sure. It's like we've achieved so much, but we're still at the mercy of our own choices, our own imaginations.
That's the big question Harari leaves us with. What kind of future are we going to imagine into being? Are we going to use our knowledge, our creativity, our technological prowess to build a better world? Or are we going to keep repeating the same patterns of destruction that we have throughout history?
Wow. What a journey this has been. We started with like gossip around a campfire,
Right. Seems like a million years ago now.
and now we're talking about the fate of humanity. If there's one big takeaway from all of this, one thing I've learned from diving into Sapiens, it's that human beings, we are storytelling creatures.
It's what we do.
The stories we tell ourselves, about our place in the universe, they shape not just our understanding of the past, but also the very course of our future. It's a powerful idea and a little bit daunting too.
It is, and it puts a lot of responsibility on us as individuals and as a species to choose our stories wisely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens, the big question for all of us listening is, what stories do you choose to believe in? And what kind of future will you help to imagine into being?